This video is about how to use a magic loop technique for an Italian cast-on method for a 2x2 rib worked in the round. This cast-on creates a beautiful, neat, and very elastic edge that works great for hats, socks, sweaters, and other tubular needs. The stitches appear to roll over without the visible cast-on edge. This cast-on is similar to a tubular cast-on method, but without the tubular part. On my channel, I have a video about this cast-on method where I use a short circular needle. In this video, I will be making a sample with a small circumference using a long circular needle and a magic loop technique. I will share all the tips and tricks I use to do it in the easiest and neatest way. And of course, we'll share my method of making the cast-on jog completely disappear. This is the beginning of the round, and the edge looks completely jogless. Magic loop is a method of knitting in the round using a long circular needle, which is much longer than the circumference of the knitted item. The cord comes out and creates two loops on the sides. Here are the great advantages of using the magic loop technique. There is no need to buy additional double point needles or circular needles of varying length. We can knit items of changing diameter. It's much easier for trying on hats and socks because of the round opening. There is less chance for baggy columns at the changeover points, only 2 with magic loop versus 4 with the double point needles. And for some people, double point needles could feel awkward. I decided to include this tip on which circular needles are better for being used for the magic loop, because the needles can vary in the types of cord in terms of its thickness and elasticity. Here I have 3 examples, and these are all good needles with good elastic cords. This is the second one, also good and elastic. However, I prefer the third one as the most delicate and the best in my experience. And this is why. With the thicker and firmer cord, there can be a risk of stretching the work between the stitches in the area where the loops comes out, or in other words, at the changeover point. While with the finer and softer cord, it practically never happens. I'm going to knit this sample using an Aran weight yarn that has a great stitch definition so that I can show every detail as clearly as possible. I will use a long circular needle, 2 sizes of the tips, a marker with a row counter, and a tapestry needle to fix the jog. To avoid a flared cast-on edge, I will use a smaller needle, 3.25 millimeters, for the cast-on row and the following 2 rounds, and then switch to a larger needle size, 3.5 millimeters, for the main part of the rib. I will cast on 64 stitches. This is how many stitches I would cast on if I were making a sock using a sock yarn. So this will be a magnified example. I wrap the yarn tail around the needle 32 times. Then I fold it to double the length. And add a little bit extra. This is where the first cast on stitch is going to be. Place the loop on the left hand and insert the index finger under the working yarn and the thumb under the tail. I start with a purl stitch. Place the right hand needle tip on top of the yarn, turn under the working yarn and back, like this. Next, the knit stitch under the tail of yarn and over the working yarn and turn. And then a purl stitch under the working yarn and over the tail, like this. The purl stitches appear like they have a little bump, and again under the tail, over the working yarn and turn to make a knit stitch. And here I suggest to bring the sides of the knit stitches always close for a snug fit. This will make a much neater cast on edge. And continue under the working yarn, over the tail, purl stitch, under the tail and over the working yarn, a knit stitch and keep it snug, under the working yarn, over the tail, a purl stitch, under the tail, over the working yarn, knit stitch, under the working yarn, over the tail, a purl stitch, under the tail, over the working yarn, knit stitch, under the working yarn, over the tail, a purl stitch, under the tail, over the working yarn, a knit stitch, under the working yarn and over the tail, a purl stitch, under the tail, over the working yarn, knit stitch, and the stitches appear to be paired together, so it's easy to count how many stitches I cast on. I'm finishing casting on. My last stitch is a knit stitch. And I turn my work clockwise, holding the last stitches secure to make sure my cast on row will not unravel. The first row is worked in the opposite direction, not yet in the round. And for the first row only, the knit stitches are worked from right to left. I continue holding the last stitches to secure them, prepare the working yarn, and then take the right hand needle tip, wrap the yarn tail around the ring finger, and I'm ready for the first row. I slip the first stitch purlwise, move my right needle tip under the working yarn and into the stitch, take it off the left needle tip and under the working yarn like this, and right away knit the next knit stitch from right to left. Now my work is secure and I can release the yarn tail. And I continue the first row, purl the purl stitches from right to left as usual, and knit the knit stitches from right to left to avoid twisted stitches. Again, a purl stitch from right to left and a knit stitch from right to left, purl stitch from right to left, and a knit stitch from right to left, purl stitch from right to left, and knit stitch from right to left, purl stitch from right to left as usual, and a knit stitch from right to left. The stitches sometimes look like they are twisted on the needle, but they are very easy to straighten out. Just follow the bumps that they all look downward. I will work a few more stitches and will show how the cast on row untwists itself. So as I go along, I move the stitches on the right hand needle to the right and move the stitches on the left needle closer to the tip. And there they are. Here I am at the end of the first row. Knit stitch from right to left, purl stitch as usual from right to left, and this is the last stitch. It's a knit stitch, and unlike other stitches, it's an exception. I will knit it from left to right to give it an extra twist, and press with my index finger so that the working yarn doesn't slip off the needle. So I finished the first row, and now I will connect my work in the circle. Here is a trick I would like to share, how I connect in a circle when I have a small number of stitches on a very long cord. I'm going to move all my stitches from the right hand needle tip all the way around onto the left hand needle tip. I pull out the cord of the right tip and slide the stitches onto the left tip. And then push the stitches onto the left hand needle like this. And straighten my work so it's not twisted. So this is what I have now. I have moved my stitches all the way from the right needle tip to the left. My yarn tail is close to the tip of the left hand needle, and my working yarn is on the other side. Next, I will bring the ends of my work together, like this. And hold them together firmly so they don't move. Now I will check that all my stitches are straight, that my work is not twisted. This is very important. So I'm checking my stitches. Checking, everything looks good. Now I will create the first loop of the magic loop. I find an approximate center of my work somewhere here, and it's very important that the last stitch on the left hand needle tip is a knit stitch for the rib 2 by 2. And I pull the cord out, making sure I still hold the ends of my work together. So I just pull the cord and move the right hand needle tip closer to my work. So I made the first loop of the magic loop. Now I transfer the two ends of the work into my left hand to make sure I'm still holding it. Place the yarn tail in front of work. And take the right hand needle. And this is the second loop of the magic loop. I'll show it again. This is the first loop, and this is the second. Now we'll prepare to connect in a circle. I will take the right tip comfortably in my right hand, yarn tail in front, working yarn is at the back, and I am taking the working yarn and holding it so I'm ready to continue. And here my first stitch of the round is a purl stitch, followed by a knit stitch, then again a purl stitch, a knit stitch, and so on. I'm placing the working yarn in front of work because I'm going to purl, and I will keep the yarn tail tight just to make sure I can show it well. Purl the first purl stitch and release the yarn tail, and I'm going to tighten the working yarn. So I tighten the first stitch, make sure I tighten this area, at the changeover point to avoid baggy columns. And then knit the following knit stitch as usual from left to right. And now I'm going to switch to a 2x2 rib. I will need to bring these two knit stitches together. Bringing the two knit stitches together, I insert the right tip into the knit and purl stitches from left to right, slip them off the left needle, return the purl stitch onto the left tip, return the knit stitch, and knit into that stitch. Then purl the purl stitch, purl a regular purl stitch, knit a regular knit stitch, so I have two knit stitches, two purl stitches, and again I need to bring these two knit stitches together. I insert the right tip into the knit and purl stitches, slip them off, return the purl stitch onto the left tip, knit the knit stitch, purl the purl stitch, then purl the following purl stitch, knit the following knit stitch, and again I have two knit stitches, two purl stitches, and I need to bring these two knit stitches together. So I slip the knit and the purl stitches off, return the purl stitch, knit the knit stitch, purl the purl stitch, purl the regular purl stitch, knit the following knit stitch, and continue until the last 4 stitches on the left needle tip. These are the last stitches on my left hand needle tip. So again, I have 2 knit stitches, then a purl stitch, another purl stitch, then a knit stitch, and one more time I need to bring these 2 knit stitches together. So that was the importance of having the last stitch a knit stitch when we were creating the first loop of the magic loop when connecting in a circle. This makes the swapping very easy. So that's it. All the stitches that were on the left hand needle tip are worked. I turn the work around to continue. Now I will pull in the left hand needle tip and pull out the right hand needle tip. To remember which tip is the right hand needle tip, I look at where the working yarn is coming out. It's always coming out of the right hand needle tip. So first I slightly pull out the right hand needle tip so that my stitches don't fall off. Then I will hold the last stitches of the left hand needle tip to prevent my work from stretching, and pull the cord of the left tip and tuck the left tip in, so I bring the stitches closer to the beginning of the tip. Working yarn is at the right tip, so I pull the right tip out to create the second loop of the magic loop. And that's the first loop. So again, I have 2 loops of the magic loop. Take the right tip and bring the stitches closer on the left hand needle. The first stitch here is a purl stitch. And the last stitch on the right tip was also a purl stitch. So everything is in order. And I will purl my first purl stitch. Here again I tighten by pulling the working yarn to make sure I don't have baggy columns. And then knit the following knit stitch. Now I have 2 purl stitches and I need to have 2 knit stitches. Again, I insert my right tip from left to right into the knit and purl stitches, return the purl stitch onto the left needle, knit the knit stitch, make sure I don't split my yarn. So I have 2 knit stitches together, then purl the purl stitch, purl the following purl stitch, knit the following knit stitch, and this is what it looks like. 2 knit stitches followed by 2 purl stitches at the changeover point, then 2 knit stitches, 2 purl stitches, and again I have to bring these 2 knit stitches together to continue the rib. And one more time, slip off the knit and purl stitches, return the purl stitch, knit the knit stitch, then purl the purl stitch, purl the following purl stitch, knit the following knit stitch, and continue like that until the end of the round. This is another situation that I may have at the end of the left hand needle. I'm bringing these 2 knit stitches together, again by swapping the knit and purl stitches. Knit the knit stitch, purl the purl stitch, purl the following purl stitch, and knit the knit stitch. So now I finished all the stitches that were on the left hand needle. Turn the work around. Hold my work to prevent it from stretching. Pull the cord of the left hand needle and tuck it in like this. And my working yarn is again coming out of the right hand needle tip, so I know which tip to pull out. Pull it out, again creating 2 loops of the magic loop. And now I'm ready to continue. So I need to bring these 2 knit stitches together. Again, I will swap the knit and purl stitches, take them off the left tip, return the purl stitch, knit the knit stitch, and here tighten at the changeover point to avoid baggy stitches, purl the purl stitch, and tighten again, purl the following purl stitch, knit the following knit stitch, and again bring these 2 knit stitches together and continue like this. I'm at the end of the round and I will show how to swap the last 2 stitches. Here I have 2 knit stitches followed by 2 purl stitches, then a knit stitch. I will swap the last 2 stitches to bring the 2 knit stitches together. The last 2 stitches may be slightly tight, so I will insert the right needle tip into both stitches, one after another, like this. Slip them off, return the purl stitch onto the left tip, make sure I don't split my yarn, and then return the knit stitch back to front onto the tip. Hold the working yarn with my index finger so it doesn't slip off, knit the knit stitch, and purl the purl stitch. And now all the stitches are worked, and the rib 1 by 1 is transferred into the rib 2 by 2. I continue the magic loop, turn the work around, slightly pull out the right hand needle tip so that my stitches don't fall off. Hold the last stitches of the left needle tip to prevent stretching. Pull out the cord. Tuck the left hand needle tip in. And pull out the right hand needle tip, creating a second loop of the magic loop. So again I have 2 loops. And I usually like to have the second loop a little bit bigger, so I have more room for my movements. After I swapped all the stitches, for the rest of the rib, I will use a larger needle size. I'm using interchangeable needles, so it's very easy for me to change just one needle tip. I'm changing the right hand needle tip. I can keep the left hand needle tip smaller, so it will be easier to insert the right hand needle tip and pick up my stitches. And also, it is only the right hand needle tip that is important in circular knitting because that's the tip that determines the size of the stitches. If you don't have interchangeable needles, you can just switch to a different needle size and use the regular circular needles. I'm beginning the next round, and the position of the yarn tail is no longer important, so for convenience I am placing it inside my work out of the way. Take the working yarn, the first stitch is a purl stitch, I have 2 purl stitches of my 2x2 rib, and I will purl the first stitch and tighten here at the changeover point to avoid baggy columns, and then knit the following 2 knit stitches in the usual way. Then I have 2 purl stitches. Again, I purl them in a regular way. Two knit stitches, 2 purl stitches, two knit stitches, two purl stitches, and I will continue this way until I work all the stitches on my left needle. Here I'm at the end of the stitches that were on my left needle tip. My last stitch is a purl one. I purl this stitch, turn the work around, slightly pull out the tip of the right hand needle so my stitches don't fall off, and hold my stitches and pull out the cord of the left hand needle tip. Push the stitches closer to the tip. Working yarn is coming out of the right hand needle tip, so I pull that tip out to create the second loop of the magic loop. Again, I have 2 loops. Working yarn in position, and here again I have 2 purl stitches. One was at the end of the right hand needle and one is at the beginning of the left hand needle. I purl that stitch and tighten here by pulling the working yarn to avoid baggy columns at the changeover points, and continue the 2x2 rib until the end of the round. Here I'm at the end of the round. Purl 2 purl stitches, knit the last 2 knit stitches, and purl the last stitch of the round. This is how it looks. Again, turn the work around to continue the magic loop. Slightly pull out the right hand needle tip so that my stitches don't fall off. And my work is now quite strong, so I don't have to really hold the stitches. I can simply pull the cord out to bring the left hand needle tip in. Take the working yarn in my left hand, pull out the right hand needle tip to create a second loop of the magic loop. And continue. The first stitch is a purl stitch. I purl it and tighten at the changeover point to avoid baggy columns. Then knit the 2 knit stitches, purl 2 purl stitches, and so on. I want to place a marker now to remember where the beginning of my round is. So I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches. So this will be 6 rounds, including the cast on round. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now I will place this marker. This is the first stitch of the round. It's on the left needle tip, and I'm placing the marker on the right hand needle tip. And pull the right hand needle tip out to create the second loop of my magic loop. But if I leave it like this, then the marker will move too much, and that's very uncomfortable. What I will do, I will change its position to secure it. I will transfer the loop of the magic loop between the first stitch of the round and the second stitch of the round, here. Yarn in front. I purl the first stitch and pull the right hand needle all the way out. And now my marker is secured between the last stitch of the round and the first stitch of the round. This is the first stitch of the round. It's now moved onto the right hand needle tip after the marker. I tighten it slightly, knit the second stitch of the round, and tighten because it's again a change over point. So I tighten to avoid baggy columns. And continue the rib. As usual, alternating 2 knit 2 purl stitches. This is again how it looks. The marker is secure. It's not moving anywhere. It's positioned between the last and the first stitches of the round. I will continue the rib until the end of the round. Here I reached the end of the round. I purl the last stitch of the round. Then I have my marker, which I move onto the right hand needle tip, and I will purl the first stitch of the round. And now it's convenient for me to change the number to number 7. So I have completed 7 rounds, plus the first stitch of the following round. And continue the magic loop. Bring the left hand needle in. Pull out the right hand needle to create again the 2 loops of the magic loop. This is the first stitch of the round. I work the second stitch of the round and tighten these 2 stitches because it is a changeover point of the magic loop to avoid baggy columns. And continue working the rib as usual, alternating 2 knit and 2 purl stitches. Here I've knitted a few rounds of the rib to make it more substantial. I take the yarn tail and twist it to make it thinner so it's easier to thread it on the needle. I have my blunt tapestry needle to fix the cast-on jog. And if you look closer at this area, then to the right of the yarn tail there is a half a stitch, and I insert my needle back to front into that stitch and pull the yarn tail through like this. Then turn the work around, and here again to the right of the yarn tail there is a half a stitch. I insert the needle front to back into that stitch and back to front into the stitch on the left like this, and pull the yarn tail through and tighten a little bit. And I will show how it looks now. So the cast-on jog completely disappeared and the cast-on edge is totally straight. It's difficult to see where the first stitches were. I hope that you liked this video and it was helpful, and I wish you a very enjoyable time knitting, and see you in the next video.